First and foremost, happy International Women's Day. So if nobody sent you a chat, I'm giving you that message now. I'm so honored to be here today. I'm so thankful that you reached out and you asked me to do this. And I must commend you for, as an organization, for intentionally celebrating International Women's Day. I didn't have much purple, but I do have purple nails, so I hope that counts for something. And so just by way of introduction, and also just to give you a heads up, I'm not going to really go into what you call this, like statistics and things like that. I really wanted this session to be more human, to be real, and to be able to create, even if for a few minutes, a safe space for not just me, but also for you. So what you're going to hear is a lot of my personal journey and how that then ties up to how we can each be four equal. So what's our individual role in this greater fight, right? So my name is ADELLE Onyango. I am a podcaster. I'm the founder of the ADELLE Onyango Initiative, and I'm also an unapologetically African woman. And I hope by the end of this, you too will be unapologetic about being an African woman. And so this year's theme is one that I truly, obviously there are many other themes, but the Each for Equal is so important to me because I just got into the NGO world, and I don't know if anybody has gotten into that space before. It's maybe it's even office spaces have that a lot. It's just full of terminologies, and there's almost a lingo you need to know when you walk into the door, track the activity, what is the sustainability, and all of these things. And then other than that, there's statistics. Now, I failed math, so already me and numbers are yeah. But there are all of these statistics, and when they look at, so you'll see your country, Kenya, right, being talked about, but never once is a name mentioned or a story mentioned. It's just 1 in 3 women and 10 out of, and that kind of puts people off a bit, I think. And then we forget that we each have an individual role to play in fighting for women's rights. Because you think, well, I don't know that lingo and I don't know the numbers and all of that. But behind the statistics, behind all of that lingo, there are stories, right? Your stories and mine. And I think that's what needs to be how you come into fighting for women's rights. So today I'm going to take you through my story. So March 31st, 2012, I lost my mom, right? And for me, International Women's Day, there's the age-old question when I was on radio, the low-hanging fruit when you want a listener to engage with you on such a day is call in and celebrate that woman who's impacted your life, right? And so for me, that would always be my late mom. To date, it would still be her. And her name is Mary Onyango, and she battled breast cancer on and off for over a decade. I was 23 when my mom passed away. It's going to be eight years at the end of this month. You know that your mom does work. You know that she does impactful work, but you're not really aware of how impactful it is, right? And as much as I would join her on going to talk to women in different spaces about breast health and just taking control over your body to the point that you realize when something is wrong, she was my mom. So I would never see, the interaction of, she's impacted somebody's life. But I do remember certain things. I remember at her funeral, I'm from Ugenya, and Yvonne Chaka Chaka was in the middle of Ugenya. Now, we are not an affluent family or whatever, so I was just this is strange, where is this chick? All the way from SA, why is she here? And I was just so my mom might have done a few things to impact people even outside of the country. My sisters and I, we got a letter from the late Kofi Annan, just, him saying how impactful my mom was. And you're just who is this woman? Did we even know her? How did she know and impact all of this? She was our mom, right? And so to date, we still actually do get emails, more so me, because of my line of work and my career, of people. I think the last one I got was from Australia, and some woman sending, oh, here's some pictures, I took with your mom. She came for like some convention, and it was her birthday on the 24th of February, and I put up a post because I'm very open about my grief journey. And, I put up a post and I was just like, oh my God, tomorrow is my mom's birthday. I really don't know what my emotions are going to be like. And someone commented on Twitter and said, hey, I have a magazine that I've kept since 2009, I think. It has because of the feature of your mom. And she put up photos and she's like, I would be more than willing to send this over to you. So you realize that I'm like, oh my God, like, I really need to celebrate this woman because she really impacted people, right? And what all of those experiences, like seeing what my mom did, I realized that she may be gone, but she's still very much alive. So it gets me questioning, as an African woman, when I live, and when I leave this world, how will I make sure that I'm really still alive, right? It's not the accolades, it's not, how many followers you have and your reach and what's your engagement. It's really the lives that you impact knowingly or unknowingly. And unknowingly, you impact people by being your real and most authentic self, because humans connect with what's human. That's why you listen to a love song. And you connect to that because it's singing a real human thing, right? And, my mom also used her story to create or to solve problems. So she was an accountant by profession. I didn't get the genes of being good with math, but so but then she got diagnosed with cancer in 1999. She went for an annual checkup, and then that's when, it was found. But you can imagine in 1999, that was synonymous with like a death sentence. People weren't really informed. So if you were diagnosed with cancer, you wouldn't say it in the workplace and stuff like that, because you don't know if that would mean that you're going to be losing your job soon. And my mom was very vocal about it at a time where it cost a lot for you to openly talk about your cancer journey. And through that, then she moved into working with the Kenya Breast Health Program, right? And they were an advocacy group creating awareness on breast cancer, but also raising funds for women who couldn't afford, cancer treatment is expensive now, but can you imagine back then, my mom had to go to South Africa to get radiotherapy because it was not available locally. So they did all of that. Sometimes we would have cancer patients in our home who've come from Meru and different places because they only could afford the actual treatment, not the accommodation and the food and all of that. And that was normal, but looking back, because obviously at that time you're like young, you're not really seeing this for what it is. You're just like, oh, we have visitors, somebody is staying with us for a while. It's like this woman used her personal story to build something that's impactful, and now her legacy is more about that part of her life, and it's not about she was a really good accountant. It's more about the impact that she had. And so for me, that then asks me, like, how can I use my story to inspire change? And I guess that's a question that I would love you guys to be able to leave with. It's like your personal story. Don't be ashamed about it. Don't feel like you're the only person going through it, because trust me, you're not. But it's really a space where it has a lot of potential for you to use that to change lives. So then October 2010, so I'm jumping to key dates in my life. So October 2010, I started my radio career by mistake. It was never the plan. I knew I was going to go into PR. When I left, I did my university. I did my high school in Botswana, and then when I came back, I was 15. And so in Botswana, I was in the IGCSE system. That's when I learned 844 is super like rigorous because when I went there, I only did 3 years of high school because they're like, how do you know what the first, like everything that's meant to be for first year, you've already learned in class 7. So I was like, wow, Kenya? Like, what's happening? And so when I came back, I was pretty young. I was 15, turning 16. My mom was like, you're too young to go into campus. So I did my A-levels at St. Mary's. When I finished, I was still, at that time, relatively young for campus, right? And because it was a 2-year program. So when I left, I had just turned 17. And most of the people going to campus at that time, now going to campus at 17 is normal. But back then, it was like, is she going to like focus on her studies? And I knew I wanted to go to USIU to do journalism. But so my mom said, okay, before you go into uni, you want to study journalism, you're really interested in this PR space, go and do more like an apprenticeship at Jinadin. So I worked there for a couple of months. And, you know, my last task was to organize a rugby tournament at St. Mary's. So they're like, oh, you were in Saints. Okay, fine. This one is yours. And Safaricom was the overall sponsor. So Safaricom could pull Jinadin off. And I remember that day, we set up the tents and everything the day before. And then there was like huge, there was not a storm, but like rain and wind. And I literally just watched our tent like get lifted and tumble across the field. And I was just like, do I really want to study this thing? But so by the time I was going into campus, when I was done with that, I knew I wanted to do PR. And I remember not knowing why I need to go into campus. So I remember sitting my mom down and being like, listen, it's 4 years of money. You can actually save that money because I'm already in the field. I already know what it is. Like, I feel it. My mom was just like, in which house are you not going to go to campus? So I ended up going to campus. And when I was there, because I loved, and I still love poetry, I use it as a way of just getting my emotions out of my body. When I went into campus, I undercover took one poetry course, but it was really lame. Like, we were reading poetry that was not, we didn't do any African poetry. We're reading parts of the Bible, and analyzing it as poetry. And I was just like, are you kidding me? There are some great African poets, Jamaican poets are doing some dope things. What are we doing here? And I remember wanting to intentionally change what poetry looks like for young Kenyans. And so I started performing my poetry, and then I realized that I needed pocket money because my mom would give you exact amount for transport. Like, if it rains and they hike the fare, God help you. Right? And so there was not much left for, if you want to party, if you want to, treat yourself and stuff. So I knew I had to figure out, how am I going to get a better income? And so I knew I got the poetry side down, but again, I'm not good with numbers. So I made friends with a friend who was studying business. And I told her, let's do an open mic gig. You handle the back end. Tell me, make sure the numbers add up and stuff. I will make sure that the poetry is banging and we have the right people performing, musicians and stuff like that. And so we started doing that. The first one was free because, you have to hook them. And then the next one, not so free. You have to buy your tickets. And we're using Facebook to market everything and creating the posters by ourselves, just using the internet. I would type how to make a poster for free, and then it gives you templates and you feed it in and stuff. And so with that, I gained, many people now knew me as a poet. So when 1FM was setting up, I don't know if you all knew 1FM, unfortunately it closed down. And I say that because I think they were really onto something. I got a call from 1FM because at this time, I left out a huge bit. USIU had just gotten a campus radio station. And I was invited. So, now you're feeling like you're a celeb on campus because you're the poetry chick and people know you. And so they invited me on a show that was for woke people. But this time I had my dreadlocks and I was only listening to Bob Marley, Lauryn Hill, and like some really deep African music, and I was just like, chant down Babylon, the system is against us. Not to say that's stereotypical, but I did have, I was doing the most. I was wearing like one earring, and my mom would be like, why are you only wearing one? I'm like, who said we have to wear two? Ask yourself. And she's just like, symmetry. And I was just like, what is that? I was just like doing the most. And so I was on this show on USIU radio, and at the time Thika Road was only 2 lanes. And the co-host of the show didn't manage to make it because she was stuck in traffic. So I was only there with the main host. And literally, I'd talk about my poetry, perform some pieces, and he had me for the entire show. And then the next weekend, he called me back, and it went on like that, and I ended up kind of slicing that other girl of her radio show without knowing, right? And I was just being called to talk. I didn't know the equipment, because I was sitting on the other side, and he would just be like, mic is on, and I'd just start talking. And what I didn't know is he really wanted to get into radio. Remember me, this was not the plan. Me, I'm in school because PR. I know after this, either I'm going back to knock on Gina Dean's door, or like... So what I didn't know is he was recording on CDs. I feel so old. Like, there is a generation that doesn't know what a CD is. And he was recording our radio shows on CDs and sending them to different media houses without my consent, actually. But it still works in my favor, so I don't give him much grief about it. And so when 1FM was setting up, they called me. And I remember getting the call. I was on campus. And I thought they were calling me because they wanted the poet to come on the show. I was like, oh, is this about poetry? And he's like, no. And it was the head of the radio, a guy called Tim. He's like, no, I want you to come on and be our drive time host. Can you host a radio show? I said, yes. Please note, I had not done any radio courses. Again, PR. So that was my concentration. But I was just like, yes. And he said, "How can you be in town?" Because their offices were in town. Can you be in town in the next 20 minutes? I said, yes, knowing damn well that Thika Road. I was like, yes. And so I made sure that I went with it because I knew they only played African music. So I knew a lot of African music. And I was, I looked the part. I had I made sure I had my super huge beaded jewelry. Like when I walk in, it's just like Wakanda has arrived. And so when I went in, I was like, yeah. I was saying, in interviews, you just oversell yourself. And he was like, great, Sawa, you're going to be our radio host. But the essence of this story is something that I probably have not talked about. When we finally got the core number of presenters that we were going to launch the station with, we had a photo shoot because we needed to have billboards and stuff to let people know there's this new radio station. And I remember walking into the photo shoot, and it was a boardroom like this where the stylist has set up all of the looks for the girls, all of the looks for the guys, and she's like, oh, Adele, this is yours. And I legit lifted up these stockings. They were like tights, and they were ripped like everywhere, and the back ripped, and I was like, I can't wear this. I was like, first, it doesn't look attractive to me. Let's just start there. And secondly, do you know my mom? Like, this is going to be on a billboard. I can't hide it. And so I was like, what are the guys? I was like, what are those hoodies there? And it was like Jamhuri Wear, which was at the time like one of the main Kenyan-made clothing brands. And it was like, it had our flag and blah, blah, blah. I was like, what are those hoodies? Oh, no, that's for the men. And I was like, so why are the men wearing that? And why are we wearing this? And the essence of the billboard is to tell people this new station, tune in. So it's literally 1FM, we play only African music. This is the frequency. So that when you're in your car, you see it and you check. Why are you selling us? Like, you're selling our bodies. Why are you selling us to... I don't understand. And I didn't wear that. We had to scrap together a completely different look. And I remember thinking, this is such a strange industry. I was just like, this is perplexing. Why are we this is so strange. And long story short, I ended up not being on the billboards because I was not showing any skin at all. And so all the other people in the billboards were like, you know, and I was just like, well, I guess this is not my time to be on a billboard. It's okay, but you'll still tune in and you'll still find me. And I just found it, that at the time I wasn't aware of it, but that was a real indicator of the industry that I was getting into, right? And what was expected of women. So when I got in, I've been doing a lot of stuff on radio stations. I've been working on radio stations that are primarily like youth-centered. And I would engage with my listeners and hang out. We used to have hangouts. And I remember at one hangout, one of the guys, you know how you talk to everybody who's there, and I asked him, so what are you doing with your life? Like, are you in uni? What are you doing? And he's like, no, I'm not in uni. My folks don't have enough money for me to go to university. And he said it like it was a by the way. You know, like it's just like, oh, I didn't have a purple top today, so I wore black. And it's just like, I was like, whoa, that is not okay. Like, that is not okay. How do we change this situation? And I felt really bad because until then, we were having these frivolous conversations on radio. I see now that I'm on the outside, like I see all the Githeri media posts and I'm just like, yup. Because then you're on the inside, you can't take it. But we were having frivolous conversations, right? Talking about relationships and stuff, but and wanting these young people to call in and give us their time and give us their opinion. But what are we giving them? And so, you know, we started off by having charity events where because I realized our education system doesn't really teach how to think beyond yourself and how to see, like, look in your hood and be like, all right, there's garbage there. That really shouldn't be the case. How do we pick it up? So we had a lot of charity events. But then I had a brainstorm with some of the young listeners and, you know, just asking them, what are your main issues, so that if I'm designing a program, it's actually benefiting you and the issues that you have. So from that brainstorm, I then thought we need to be able to have scholarships. And I'm telling you this whole process so that you understand how you can actually make a difference from wherever space you put in. And so literally just walked into Centonomy. I was like, hi, my name is Adele. I have all of these young people whose parents can't afford to take them to university. They're opening businesses. The businesses are failing not because they're bad, but it's because they don't know about money. Can you give them a scholarship? And Centonomy said, we can give them a half scholarship. That still wasn't good enough because I'm like, I want them to just bring yourself to the class. And so when I remember the first round of scholarships, National Bank wanted to do some commercial engagement with me, and I was like, okay, this is so great, but listen to this. How's about you still do this with me, but you also sponsor this number of young people to get a scholarship. So Centonomy is covering this much, you're covering this much. We'll do everything you want. You want the photo op, just send these kids to school, right? And it worked out, and they agreed. And I remember thinking, so all it takes is just trying, like just try and ask, like, are you willing to do ABCD? Because many people want to help, they just don't know how to help. And so for me, what that showed me is that you don't have to have, as I said, when you're in the NGO space, it may feel like you have to have studied gender issues, you have to have studied like project management and You just kind of have to be human and be able to see, this is happening to women in the office. I really don't think that's right. How do we change it? And then talk to the next woman, and you'll find that your social contacts can help you develop something, a solution that can actually be impactful. Even if it's to one person, that's changing one life. That's more than most people do, right, in a lifetime. I've really grown up in the last 2 years, mainly because of resigning from my job and knowing that I've outgrown a certain space, and knowing that, especially as an African woman, I wanted my life to be more than pop culture. I wanted it to be impactful, and I was like, am I doing the millennial thing of just being like, I want to get down in the trenches, I don't want to be in the office? But I realized that I wasn't going to change lives in a box in a studio, because life was happening outside there, and it was a hard decision to get to, but I think what's also important to know as an individual, which is really the basis of this talk, is what is the role of the individual, is to know where you're at emotionally, and to know when you've outgrown a space, right? And thankfully, because of how I was raised, I was very aware that, yeah, man, it's been real, but I'm not the 20-year-old who is super excited to get on radio anymore. It's a very hard, and we're going to be, in your day-to-day lives, I don't know, you're probably trying to make a hard decision right now that nobody really knows, and it's emotionally draining, and it's probably going to affect many people, because maybe, especially if it's something around your job, that's an income gone, right? So maybe there were people benefiting from your income. But I think it really, why I say I've grown up in the last 2 years, it forced me to understand that it's okay to be the first to do something. It's okay to still believe in your vision, even if you can't see anything like it around you. They normally say sight is the greatest killer of vision. So you have this vision and you're like, woo, that would be great. And then you look around, you're just like, but none of these people is doing anything like that. Like, maybe they know something that I don't. Maybe this is gonna fail and all of that stuff. And that's really the space that I'm in with podcasting, where I literally just got onto Amazon. No, I got onto Google first, how to start a podcast. I think it's called How To. So it has all these articles on how to do different things, and had a list of microphones that I needed with their links to Amazon. Check them out. And like, this is too expensive. This is nah. Did the Kenyan thing of, I have a Rela in the States. When are you coming? Bring the, what is your address? And she brought my microphones, and that's literally how I started. I work with what I know. 1 year into podcasting, now is when I fully know how to use my microphones. I was using them wrong for like a good 6 months. But I'm okay with it, which is why my weekly podcast is called Legally Clueless. I think most of the times we don't start doing something because you don't want to look stupid, you don't want to fail, you don't know, is it going to work, this fear of the unknown thing. But to really impact lives, you have to be willing to look like you're crazy, step out of your comfort zone and things like that. And then the other podcast, which leads me to my next section, is Perspective. And Perspective is really on gender issues, because I just feel like, man, we have so much work to do, even just like, I call it a cultural audit. And I think as Africans, as Kenyans, I don't know if we have to have a full conference, but we need to like reevaluate the cultural truths that we have and see which ones are advancing us, which ones are not. It's time for like a proper cultural audit, because the next date is December 12th, 2008, was the day that I got raped. And I've been vocal about being a survivor of rape. Not from the very beginning, because I think for 2 years I actually didn't even tell my mom, who, you know, was my closest, my best friend. And I didn't tell her because at the time she was going through chemotherapy, so I didn't want an added stress. And then I didn't tell her because of the thing that we do as women, which is like be the super superwoman, I can handle it myself. I don't need nobody. I'm going to figure it out by myself, blah, blah, blah. And for me, figuring it out meant pushing all my efforts into anything but that. So at that time, I was starting my open mic gig that I mentioned earlier in campus. And so that flourished, not because, you know, we were the special chosen ones or whatever, but it's because I worked extra hard in it, which was good, but I was doing that to avoid dealing with healing from this traumatic experience. And then I did the solo fixing thing for like a year and a half. And when I realized that really was not, I just kept crashing. It's a cycle, right? And I just kept crashing. I then wrote a letter, being the extra child that I am, to my mom. And I listened to when she was in the shower, and I went and I just put the letter on her bed, and I ran back to the room and I sat in silence. I was like, is she out? And you hear the water go off and you're like, oh my God, is it too late? Maybe I need to go and take the letter back and like just like rip it up. But, you know, my mom was a very loving person, and obviously going through certain challenges in her life. She was just like, okay, did you go to hospital? Did you do all of these tests that you needed to have done? And I was like, yes, I did. I had a whole folder of like, this is the date I went, and these, you know, when I stopped taking these medicines, this was the last test I did. Here are the results. I'd done all the physical healthcare thing, but I had not taken care of my mental. And so that's when my mom, I normally say she encouraged me, but it was more like forced me to go into therapy. And that's what saved me. I'm a huge believer in therapy. I'm a huge believer in taking your mental health as importantly as you do your physical. So if you got a swelling here, you'd not even go home. You'd be like, please, you know, you'd go and tell your boss or whoever is directly above you and be like, I need to take the afternoon off. I need to go and have this checked. But with our mental, we just kind of dismiss it. And sometimes it could be an actual mental illness, not even just, you know, your mental health, right? So I went into therapy, and I really learned so much about how, you know, the first session I remember was like, we were ticking boxes of how many hours do you sleep? What are your eating patterns like and stuff? And to date, that was so powerful to me because I realized that your mental manifests physically. And it's not only at the insomnia or whatever. For example, for me, when I know something is wrong is when I sleep too much. So sleep is like my escape. And because it's so easy for me, like even if you tell me now, like nap time, I'll just be like, all right. And I put my hands down and sleep. So to avoid dealing with issues, I would sleep until like 11 a.m., noon, right? And through therapy, then I learned the tools that I need to have and the exercises that I need to have to be able to handle my mental. But the experience also then taught me that with time, obviously, then I got into radio. I had this platform, and, you know, if it happened to me, it must be happening in other quotas. It must be manifesting differently, maybe domestic violence, marital rape, date rape, you know. And then I started reading up a lot, and I created a program called No Means No. Again, this was when there was only Facebook. I'm not even sure there was Twitter then. So it was just Facebook, and I created, because I was angry. I was like, this happened to me and I'm not seeing anybody talking about it. Like, we're just acting like this thing doesn't happen. And so I created a group, a campaign called No Means No. And it was a Facebook group, and I was just like, how can we make sure this doesn't happen? Like, what's happening in England? Like, what are you guys doing in your clubs to make sure that women are safe? What are you guys in Botswana? Because obviously I went to high school there. What's happening there that maybe I can take and localize for, at that time, a Nairobi context? And it was really the power of the internet, because people then said, oh, we're having these posters up in the bathrooms. Obviously, in Western countries, they were more like bold and stuff like that. And so then what I did is I made a campaign using photography and the open mic gigs just to start talking about it. And I then came across this term, which is rape culture. And I was like, what is rape culture? And I unpacked it, and really, in loose terms, an environment that allows rape to thrive. So what are those things that allows rape to thrive? It's how we view women in my society. It's like we're an object. We get street harassed, and we will, when we're going to town, you know there's an outfit you wear when you're going to town. And that outfit is, you know, you're well thought of. You don't want any attention. You want to be able to run. You want to be able to, you want to be like chonjo. And I'm somebody who loves music, but even when I'm in town, I have my earphones on so that if you cat call me or whatever, and I don't respond, it's like, hey, the headphones. But I'm not listening to anything because I also have to be alert and chonjo, like for whatever is coming. And I just think that's not okay, because if I go somewhere, like when I leave the house, if I'm driving, I share my WhatsApp live. You know how you can share your live location for 8 hours with my husband? If I use an Uber, sharing that ride is not, it's not an option. It's really not an option. I'm just like, hey, I don't know what this driver could do. And there have been situations to date in Nairobi where women have been raped by their cab drivers, and the cab companies are not doing anything about it. They're not banning these men from being on any of their platforms. So even if he's banned from, company A, Sky still has his own company B, so he's still running his business. So we're really not addressing it. So all of these things then got me so angry that not only did I share my story, but I started questioning a lot of things vocally, and it made me have an X on my back, because now it's like you're questioning the powers that be, because a patriarchal society there's a power to the men, and the society, that structure is also hurting the men, because it's telling the men unrealistic things. Like, you've got to be a provider by any means, right? You can't cry, you can't do all of this. So I'm like, anytime the term toxic feminist comes up, I'm like, but we're also fighting for you. Like, we want you liberated from these things that are stressing you. And if you check the suicide rates, more men than women. So we're fighting for you as well. But it's a small price to pay in my head. But it then led me to not only opening the ADELLE ONYANGO initiative to put the youth programs in, but also to create the Safe 247 program, which is a free group therapy program for survivors of rape, women who have survived rape. And it's, right now we're drawing up the curriculum with some psychologists that you mentioned knowing, because I don't want survivors to have to not only deal with people, victim shaming and blaming, not only dealing with seeing their perpetrators every day, because sometimes it happens within families, and then also have to think about how to pay for this thing that Adele says is so important in our healing. And so we did a fundraiser again, November, during the 16 days of activism. This was again me just saying, I'm just going to try and figure out how to help women, because going into organizations was really tough. Nobody wanted, when you say the R word, rape, they're just like, my brand can't be side by side with such a term. And you're just like, but why? You serve your audience or your target market is like mainly women. They are suffering through this. So don't you want to be involved in making sure that they are safe? But I just decided to put it out there and to have Kenyans donate towards making Safe 247 a reality. And in 16 days, we raised 400,000 Kenya shillings from Kenyans, right? My target was like 10 Gs. I was just like, I can't even raise 10 Gs. God is great. But it just shows you that people want to help, they just don't know how. In closing, I put in here that I still don't have enough funds to go past running 3 cohorts, but I'm sure I'll find a way. So it's not all rosy. When you decide to go into this field and say, I'm going to try and make a difference, it's not like the universe is just like, give her everything she needs. Like, it's still a battle. And you have to be cognizant of that, but it shouldn't stop you from doing it. So in closing, I just think there are very many numbers, there are very many statistics, but we don't hear enough stories. And the reason we don't hear enough stories is that individuals are not using their stories to see how can they make a safer space for women, a more, an environment that allows women to thrive. It could be standing up for mothers in your place of work, right? That's something I've done. I'm not a mom, but I was just like, I'd rather think that she needs to be able to express in a dignified space, right? And y'all have not done anything towards that, so that's a problem, right? It means calling out rape culture there are jokes. There are jokes that happen. I've called out my husband's friends. I've called out any male friends. I wouldn't laugh. I'll just be like, this meme, no. It's not on because of na. And somebody then realizes, oh, yeah, actually it is promoting this, that, and the other. Thanks for that. And you've educated one person. So my call to you is, from the 3 different dates that I've given you, is, we're here for, there's this term, we're here for a good time, not a long time. And so when you leave, how will you ensure that you still live? How are you using your story to impact other women and to elevate other women as well? And it's really, you don't need to go to school and to know certain terms and whatever. You just need to be human, and you just need to be more empathetic. That's all. Thank you. Right now we're like, we have a support group of only us two, because it's tough. Like, you're going against the status quo. You're doing things differently. My podcast is basically its own media house from my apartment. And so you do need someone to be like, you can do it. And so we do have calls between each other. But I think, funnily enough, I don't have to do too much, because the listeners are actually forcing the mainstream media to change their madness. I did try. When I resigned, the first time I resigned was December 2018, December 27th, 2018. And then I had a 3 months notice period to serve. And during that time, because you're told you can't leave Kobaya, you have to be a nice person, don't burn your bridges, I then started renegotiating my contract. One of my terms was that Legally Clueless, the podcast, now obviously that time it had a completely different name and angles, but I still wanted to tell stories, would get on. I said the only way I'll stay on The Breakfast Show is if you have elements of this podcast on it, because I didn't want to, A, I didn't want to be in a box, and B, I didn't want to only talk about pop culture. I was like, damn, like, can we get these stories out there, right? And unfortunately, the negotiations, yes, it did result in me signing. So after the 3 months, I signed a new contract, but it had some terms that were not fulfilled in terms of like the manpower that I would need to create this additional show. And then I resigned again in June. But this time I didn't have to serve notice because I'd renegotiated to make sure there was no notice period and things like that. So I did try, but then I realized I'm the problem, because A, this is not my company, so there's a vision that I don't know about, and I'm trying to take my vision and force it into that one. Why, right? B, why are you not trying to develop your own platform and your own vision? And that's why I just jumped out and started doing all of this. Also, I turned 30 in 2019, so I was like, I'm 30 years old. I can do anything. 30 is just so great. Like, 20s was just such a mess. I'm just like, 30 has such clarity. But it really does. And you just don't take nonsense. So I'm even one of those people, I'm looking forward to 40 because I'm like, if 30 is this, it means 40 when I get there, I'll just be like, But, so on the outside, now there are numbers for my podcast. Amazing numbers, like the targets that I set for 2 years, I knocked them in 9 months. The weekly one has about 300,000 listens and streams to date. And it has a visibility. I've done tours and things like that. Because of that, now the mainstream is calling because they're just after numbers. And they're seeing the numbers of the listeners are dwindling. It's completely, like, even if you're the top station right now, you have a bigger piece of a smaller pie, right? And the listeners are the ones now demanding because they're watching Jay Shetty and like all of his inspirational stuff, Oprah, and they're just like, yo, me in the morning, I don't want to hear about relationships or anything crass or whatever. I want to be motivated. I want to feel good. If we're talking about corruption or whatever is happening in the news, can we go a step further as the media? Instead of, you can't also be complaining but also because the listeners, how even you guys know how you consume content right now. It's not the same as even 2-3 years ago. In your cars, you listen via Bluetooth, you listen to your own music, right? So you don't want to hear my grandma calls them boom twaff. You want to hear the boom twaff in the morning. You want like something that's going to get you when you walk into the office, you're like, yes, let's do this. And so it's changing. It's changing. And if we keep watching for the next 3 to 5 years, there's going to be, especially audio content, there's going to be a shift. There's layoffs that are happening. And I see people reporting the layoffs saying, especially for media houses, saying, Uhuru's economy, well, I'm like, Uhuru has done some things, but this is not on him. Like, this was coming either way, right? The audience has demanded it, yeah.
Have you engaged other organizations that have been in the CSR space for longer, so that you can partner and do something more impactful and support you financially?
It's Carolina for Kibera. They're an NGO, and they are already doing such remarkable work in terms of healthcare in Kibera, in terms of helping teen moms, in terms of helping the youth get some digital skills and reduce the digital gender gap and stuff. And they, because of the line of their work, they would come across a lot of survivors of rape. And so we partnered more on a scale level to be able to build a sustainable program, to be able to track the activity so that when we do go to donors, we have an actual scalable project. The reason why I take, and maybe it's the media industry, I'll be very frank with you, maybe it's the media industry, it's like some form of PTSD from the media industry, so I'm not too trusting. And I think partnerships come when you have a very solid idea. And so when I come to you, I'm telling you, I want you to bring your expertise to this point. I want you to fund, the toolkit, or I want you to fund survivors from South B area, or survivors from certain areas. And I think that's where I want to get it to. I have enough to kind of run these 3 cohorts to be able to create a really good product right now. And I will be definitely, I have actually started looking for different partners now because I have a tangible space and I can be able to say, no, I want you to come here, I want you to come here. Because sometimes with partnerships, you have to be cognizant that your vision can be distorted, right? I ran all of the youth programs with no funding. None whatsoever. It was partnerships. I was just like, you guys are skilled. We had a job shadow program. That's an annual program. And I was just like, you're an HR recruitment firm. You have people. I want these kids to get apprenticeships. I mean, it's what you do on a day-to-day. I'm not asking you to step out of your... So it ran on partnerships that were not financial. I ask a lot of questions before partnering with people, also because I'm new in the space. So I need to know when I get in. But I do have an amazing board who really guide me and make sure that if they're in certain rooms with people who they believe in, they kind of connect me to them. But I'm also still learning as well. So I'm more like, you should see me asking, I'm just like, are there any workshops for like activism? How do you have impactful activism, like efficiency and stuff like that? So yeah, but that will definitely come for sure. Yeah.
So Adele, I'm actually very proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just meant to ask something. So I realized a lot of the programs we have around youth, around women, around trying to change our culture are based in the cities and in the metropolis usually. But the women, I think, suffer the most. The girls, I think, suffer the most are the girls living up country. Because at a very young age, they assume multiple roles of a mother, roles of this. Nobody cares about the emotional world, psychological, physical, whatever.
Yeah.
I feel in Nairobi, we have abundance of information. And I feel for these poor girls, everything, or for the poor women actually, everything for them is a stretch. Do you know of like NGOs or people that are trying to reach out? Not necessarily, not like Kajiado. I'm talking of Vihiga or Isiolo or Marsabit. Like those girls, by the time they are 30, Lord, they have been through so much.
The first part I would like to say, it's absolutely true what she said. But even in Nairobi, there's still what's happening in those other counties is happening in Nairobi. It's happening in Kibera where a girl gets raped because she was promised new shoes. A girl gets raped because she's never had fried chicken. And so this man promises her fried chicken, right? There's pockets in Nairobi of the same problem, but it's manifesting differently because maybe it's a low-income area and stuff like that. So Nairobi still has tons of issues that we have to deal with, and even culturally. Some of these men will be, like a 30-year-old is having a relationship with a 13-year-old. The 13-year-old's mom is saying, what's the problem? That's her boyfriend, and sometimes he helps with rent and blah, blah, blah. The man has gone to the 13-year-old because he's been told part of being a man is control, and you have to be, you have to have control over this woman you're with. And possibly the 30-year-olds around him are just like, control over who, right? And so he's going younger and younger and younger. The 13-year-old is looking for acceptance, right? Because we don't know what her home environment is like. The mom knows no better because that was her life growing up. And me saying this 30-year-old man should not be here, am I going to pay rent? Because he's helping them, right? So it's still happening in Nairobi as well. The issue of young girls being manipulated into relationships because of sanitary products, still happening in Nairobi as well. And it's happening in other counties as well. There's Groots Africa. I came across Groots Africa because of asking one of my board members. I was just like, I need to know who else is doing stuff and just sit and talk to them to learn about how they run their NGO, because it's a different space for me. I'm coming from media. And I sat with one of the ladies from Groots. Just check them out. They've been doing amazing work, I think, from the 90s, right? And when we were talking, she mentioned a chief in Butsotso North, Kakamega area, a male chief who is fighting for women's rights. He's fighting for women who get disinherited and the rape cases and stuff like that. And I said, what? There's a man in like a rural area who's fighting for women? It's hard enough finding a man in like urban areas, right? And they said, no, he's doing amazing work. I took it upon myself as an individual to go to Kakamega. I'd never been to Kakamega. To jump in a car, get like someone to drive me and my videographer, because I wanted to tell this chief story. And we went deep into, I hope I'm pronouncing it well, because there's a that I can't say, but with so not, right? Middle of nowhere, and this chief had his squad of like other chiefs from other parts. There were like 5 men, and when they introduced themselves, the crazy thing they did, for me, I'd never seen this, is they started off by saying who their wife was, what she does, how they're so proud of her, she's a lecturer, blah, blah. And then he hopped on his motorbike and we followed him, and we went to a women's group that he works with. So they're like the police of the village. They even have a uniform. So if there's a case of rape, before the families exchange money or marry off the child, because that's what happens, the lady I was interviewing, she said, when people see us with our uniform, they just know nothing can happen without us saying. And when they need to escalate it, now their ally is this chief to make sure justice is served. There are actually pockets of good that's happening, and why it's important for us to actually go and learn about these stories is to know, how can I empower this chief father, right? How can I make sure him and his squad talk to other chiefs in my home area? And it takes an individual effort as well. And to track, what is Groots doing? Do they need funding, right? Do they need someone to just go and speak? Do they need somebody to donate certain products and stuff? If you look for Groots, I can vouch for them. The work they're doing is absolutely amazing. So that's one NGO, I think, that is doing work in Nairobi as well, but also outside Nairobi.
And some of us, like, we're in full-time roles, so we probably don't necessarily have like the bandwidth in the middle of a week to go to.
True.
So at the platforms of where support can be given, whether it's financially or otherwise, are they just on these websites, or what's the most effective way of helping?
So most of this, and I've seen this with Carolina for Kibera, there's a global thing with NGOs called Giving Tuesdays. So every Tuesday they amplify, like, or you can donate here, and they mostly do it on their websites, which is great because obviously you do need funding to scale, to have a sustainable program and stuff like that. I think also just sharing and knowing what's happening around you. I was so embarrassed that one of my board members who sits in New York. And so I was like, how are you telling me what's happening in my country? Like, shame on me for not knowing that. And when I knew about them, now every chance I get, I share about what Groots is doing, because you never know how somebody else can support. So yes, there's a Giving Tuesday thing on their online platforms. Most of them even have talks. So like Carolina for International Women's Day, they did put out a call out for people to come in and talk, so for women to come and talk to the young girls. Time is also something so amazing to share with these organizations. And then also just share, we're all in the digital world, right? So are we sharing what the organizations are doing? It's sharing about what's happening in your country, and knowledge has been democratized, right? So we kind of have access to knowing a bit more, and just finding it out and saying, oh, look what this person is doing. Like, this is so great, because in your field, one person may be able to really impact that organization and empower them. And most of these organizations really do have, unless they wouldn't let you meet their clients and stuff like that if they're dealing with like minors or like survivors and stuff, no. But they have an open door policy to their admin to learn and go and learn more and be like, oh, what are you guys doing? That's how I walked into Carolina for Kibera, by the way. We were not boys before. I was just like, let me go and see what these guys are doing. Drove to Kibera and ended up having a 5-hour meeting, because when I got there, I didn't want to leave. I was just like, this is so great. So yeah, I think that's something you could look into. Yeah.